Trying to make any political statements. I'm just evaluating the evidence here.
He told reporters it was the hardest punch she'd ever taken and that she had stopped the fight to preserve her life. Well, Khalif is one of two athletes who was cleared to compete in Paris despite being disqualified from last year's World Boxing Championships for failing to pass a gender eligibility test.
Here's what we know. I listened to the press conference yesterday put on in Paris by the IBA, and this is what we know. Both boxers were initially subjected to a chromosomal test by an independent laboratory in Istanbul after the IBA received complaints from coaches and competitors during the 2022 Women's World Boxing Championships. Both athletes were then retested in India again during the next year during the same Women's World Boxing Championships in 2023 to clarify and confirm prior results. This is when both athletes were then found to have XY chromosomes.
Classic males have an X and a Y. Classic females have an X and an X. All of us start down the same pathway with potential to be either female or male from a sexual organ, sexual characteristic standpoint. But the presence of some genes on the Y chromosome send that classically down the pathway male.
People born as men or XY chromosome or however you want to define that, over time they have spent a long period of time being exposed to higher levels of testosterone and likely will have more satellite cell fusion and have more myonuclei. Your overall muscular potential is greater when you have more myonuclei.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Enlightened Athletics, where we take a deep dive into the science of athletics and explain and clarify important issues that are going on in the sporting world. And we have a very interesting topic today that has been a huge controversy at the Olympic Games in Paris over the last couple weeks, but we're going to look at this from a very different perspective and uncover what I believe is the most important insight into this controversy that the mainstream media seems to have just missed completely, okay? So before we do that, I want to give a little backstory to add a unique perspective and some context to what I want to say in this video, okay? So for almost a decade, I competed at the highest level of natural bodybuilding. I'm a 7-time natural bodybuilding champion. In 2021, I won the Musclemania Fitness Universe title, one of the most prestigious titles in all of natural bodybuilding. Okay, and in this federation, all athletes are tested before the competition to ensure that nobody has taken any form of exogenous hormones like steroids that can infer a significant advantage over the other competitors. Now, keep in mind, I am a male athlete competing against other male athletes. We have the same biological advantage as biological males compared to our female counterparts, okay? So since puberty, we've been exposed to higher levels of androgens, which is then translated into more muscle mass, greater strength, more speed, etc., okay? So even though I'm a biological male competing against other biological males that have the same natural advantage, if one of us happens to have taken more hormones through the use of steroids, it imparts an even greater advantage, okay? And a new study shows that even if that steroid use happened years before, that individual can still have a significant advantage over someone that has never used steroids before. Let's take a look.
So a really cool new study just came out where they were assessing what's called myonuclei density in current steroid users, former steroid users, and people who have never used steroids before. Let's back up a little bit and talk about myonuclei and myonuclear domain theory. Myonuclei are what they sound like. They are muscle nucleus. So when you're in high school biology and they were teaching about the brain of the cell, the nucleus, these are nuclei in muscle cells. But muscle cells are very unique in that they are the only cell type that has multiple myonuclei. In fact, they can get a lot of myonuclei. And the way that myonuclear density increases is you have these things called satellite cells, which kind of sit on the surface of the muscle cell in the sarcolemma. And as you resistance train or take anabolic steroids, those satellite cells can fuse and donate their myonuclei so that now you have more myonuclei in the muscle cell. Why does that matter? It's thought that the myonuclei number can determine your overall muscular potential. And that's because it's thought that each myonuclei can control protein synthesis for a defined surface area of the muscle cell, meaning once your muscle cell gets so big, it can't really get bigger at its set myonuclei because each myonuclei can only control a certain area of protein synthesis. So once you get to that limit, if you don't donate more myonuclei through satellite cell fusion, then you're kind of at your limit. So the more myonuclei you can fuse, the greater the overall muscle you can build. It's thought that once myonuclei fuse, they don't unfuse. The question then becomes, what relevance does this have? What does it mean? If you've already fused those myonuclei, it's possible that is still conferring long-term benefits to those former users.
So there is a very interesting point here. The argument I keep hearing from one side of this debate is that the Algerian boxer Khalif was born a female, has identified as a female since birth. It says female on their passport, and they have competed their entire career against women and even lost to women. So therefore, it has to be fair, right?
And then Iman Khalif will show you all the records where she was born a female, identifies as a female, has female on her passport, went through all the testing. The Olympics Commission said she's fine. Boxed females, lost to females,
all they've
beat
seen
females,
is her passport.
and she's from Algeria.
She failed the sex test.
I'm here to totally dismantle that logic using science, which nobody in the mainstream media seems to know anything about. When I competed in the Natural Mystery Universe in 2021, out of the 12 competitors in my division, only 3 of us passed the steroid test, meaning 8 of those dudes failed the test for the use of performance-enhancing substances, banned substances in that federation. I know what you're thinking, Ryan, how is this even relevant to the topic of women's boxing in the Olympics? And I promise you, if you just stay tuned to the end of this video, I will answer that very question. So, out of the 8 guys that were caught using steroids, I beat all of them except for 1. So, in a perfect world, if everyone competed fairly and everyone passed their test, I would have placed second in that competition. But this was not the reality. The person that placed first was tested positive for banned substances, was disqualified, and therefore I was bumped up to that first place spot. My point here is that even though all of those individuals that failed their test had a biological advantage over me from the use of steroids, I was still able to beat all but one of them naturally, even though they cheated, because I was able to technically execute my diet better and come in more conditioned, even though many of them had a greater muscle mass. The difference here is that bodybuilding is a sport of aesthetics. So you can offset that difference in muscle mass sometimes by being more conditioned and having a more aesthetic appearance. However, in a performance-based combat sport like boxing, that increased muscle mass translates into greater force production, increased strength, faster speeds, harder strikes, which would definitely impart a physical advantage over the other competitors. In combat sports, a greater technical proficiency and skill can sometimes offset or neutralize some of those advantages by being able to move more technically, avoid strikes, but that does not mean that the biological advantage does not exist. In Khalif's case, that biological advantage was enough to secure 44 victories out of 53 fights, meaning that a few of those women that they faced had enough technical proficiency to weather the storm, move well enough to avoid damage, and squeak out a victory. So the argument that just because a few of the women have been able to beat Khalif, despite Khalif having previously been banned from international boxing competitions for failing the karyotype test, showing that they have XY chromosomes like a biological male, doesn't mean that it's an even playing field, because Khalif can train those technical skills over time to match those of the few women who were able to beat them, but those same women can never reach Khalif's biological capacity without the use of performance-enhancing drugs, because Khalif has a greater myonuclear density. So this is not political, this is science. This is just demonstrating that an individual with an XY chromosome should not be competing in a sport where performance metrics are very important, especially a combat sport where it's physical and people can get hurt, against other individuals that have an XX chromosome. That's it. It's not political. This is science. So if you like this content, please hit that like button, ring that bell so you get notified the next time I upload a video like this. Please send this out to as many people as possible so that we can end this silly debate once and for all and get back to the real important issues that matter. Thank you for watching. See you later. Bye-bye.